The town of Fairhaven was a place of stark contrasts. On one side, towering mansions lined the pristine streets, their well-manicured lawns and iron gates a symbol of the wealth that ruled the city. The elite dined in fine restaurants, attended galas at the Harrington estate, and lived in a world untouched by struggle. On the other side of town, life was a different story. Small houses with peeling paint, narrow streets filled with hardworking people who woke before dawn and returned home long after the sun had set. It was in this world that Ethan Carter was raised. Ethan had never known privilege, but he knew ambition. Working odd jobs from a young age, he had a dream that stretched far beyond Fairhaven's class divides. He wanted to make something of himself, not just for wealth, but for freedom, for the right to control his own destiny. He worked at a local mechanic shop by day and studied business at night, his calloused hands a testament to his relentless drive. People in town admired his determination, but they also whispered that no matter how hard he worked, he would never be one of the elite. Sophia Harrington, on the other hand, had been born into wealth. The daughter of William Harrington, one of Fairhaven's most powerful businessmen, she had always been expected to follow a certain path, one paved with luxury, social connections, and a future that kept her firmly within the upper class. But despite the privilege, Sophia felt trapped. She despised the expectations placed upon her, the way her father spoke of marriage as if it were a business merger rather than a matter of the heart. Sophia and Ethan's worlds should never have collided, but fate had other plans. One summer, when Sophia volunteered at a community outreach program, more to escape her father's pressures than anything else, she met Ethan. Unlike the polished, arrogant men she was used to, Ethan was raw, passionate, and full of ambition. He spoke of dreams with a fire in his eyes, and Sophia found herself drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. What began as casual conversations soon turned into long walks by the river, stolen moments of laughter, and whispered promises of a future they could build together. Their love, however, was a fragile thing, constantly shadowed by the weight of their backgrounds. William Harrington was quick to notice his daughter's growing fondness for the poor mechanic and was furious. He saw Ethan as nothing more than an opportunist, someone beneath their name, someone who could never provide Sophia with the life she deserved. He wasn't subtle in his disapproval, warning Sophia that loving a man like Ethan would only lead to disappointment. Adding to the pressure was Jason Reynolds, the son of one of William's business partners. Jason was everything William wanted for his daughter, wealthy, influential, and eager to claim Sophia as his own. He had spent years vying for her affection, and with her father's approval, he had every advantage. He looked down on Ethan, treating him as an insignificant obstacle. Despite it all, Sophia and Ethan clung to their love, dreaming of a future where class didn't matter. But in a town like Fairhaven, love alone was never enough. Ethan and Sophia's love had defied expectations for years. Despite the whispered warnings, the disapproving glances, and her father's outright fury, they had stayed together, dreaming of a future where their love mattered more than money. Their late-night conversations were filled with plans of leaving Fairhaven, of building a life on their own terms, of proving that love was worth more than wealth. And when Ethan knelt before Sophia on a warm summer evening, offering her a simple but heartfelt proposal, she didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered, tears in her eyes. 1,000 times, yes. For a moment, it felt like their dreams were within reach, but the illusion shattered as soon as the Harrington family learned of the engagement. William Harrington was livid. He refused to let his daughter throw her life away on a man with nothing to his name. The Harringtons were one of the wealthiest families in Fairhaven, and their legacy was built on power, influence, and strategic alliances, not on reckless romantic choices. Sophia's mother wept, warning her of the sacrifices she'd have to make by marrying a poor man. Her friends, socialites who had never known struggle, gasped in horror at the idea of her giving up a life of luxury, but it was her father's words that cut the deepest. "If you marry him," William said coldly,
You will no longer be my daughter.
The pressure was unbearable. Sophia loved Ethan, she truly did, but the weight of expectations, the fear of a life filled with financial uncertainty, and the thought of losing everything she had ever known began to poison her resolve. She convinced herself that love alone wasn't enough, that eventually Ethan would resent her for what she had lost. That security mattered more than passion. As the wedding day approached, doubts consumed her. And then, just days before they were supposed to stand before the world and vow to love each other forever, she made her decision. She called him to the Harrington estate, her hands trembling as she faced him. Ethan's face lit up when he saw her, unaware of the storm brewing in her heart. But as soon as she spoke, his smile faltered. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I can't marry you, Ethan." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice hardened as she forced herself to say the words. "It's not just about us. It's about my family, my future. I need stability. I can't throw my life away." Ethan took a step back, as if she had struck him. "Throw your life away?" he repeated, his voice laced with disbelief and pain. "Is that what this is to you?" Sophia turned away, unable to face the hurt in his eyes. "I'm sorry." Ethan stood there for a long moment, his heart breaking, his dreams crumbling. Then, with a slow nod, he clenched his fists. "I see," he said quietly. There was nothing left to say. He walked away that night, humiliated and shattered, the love of his life choosing wealth over him. But as he left Fairhaven, he made himself a promise. One day he would return, and when he did, he wouldn't be the poor boy they had cast aside. He would make them all regret ever doubting him. Ethan left Fairhaven with nothing but a duffel bag, a broken heart, and a burning determination. The sting of Sophia's rejection and the humiliation he felt that night fueled his every step as he boarded a bus to the city, vowing never to return as the man he once was. He had no connections, no wealth, and no safety net, but he had ambition, and that was enough. At first, life in the city was brutal. Ethan took on any job he could find: bartending, working construction, even sleeping in his tiny rented room, as he taught himself business and finance late into the night. He refused to let failure define him. He devoured books on investment strategies, real estate markets, and entrepreneurship. Every setback, every rejection, only strengthened his resolve. His first break came when he landed a job as an assistant at a mid-level real estate firm. It was grueling, and he was treated like an errand boy, but he saw an opportunity where others saw hardship. He studied the deals his bosses made, observed the way wealth was built and protected, and learned how the city's power players operated. Then, he took a risk. Using every penny he had saved, Ethan invested in a struggling property in an up-and-coming neighborhood. It was a gamble, but one he had calculated carefully. The neighborhood gentrified, the value of his property skyrocketed, and he flipped it for triple the amount he had paid. That first success ignited a wildfire. From there, Ethan built his empire. He leveraged his profits into bigger real estate investments, developed commercial properties, and expanded into tech and finance. He worked harder than anyone, outsmarting seasoned investors and forging partnerships with influential figures. Soon his name was spoken in boardrooms with respect, and the once poor mechanic from Fairhaven became a self-made millionaire. Wealth changed Ethan, but it didn't consume him. He learned that money could buy power, comfort, and influence, but not loyalty. He watched supposed friends betray each other for financial gain and learned to guard his trust. He saw how wealth could make people greedy, how relationships became transactional in high society. But he also learned something else. True love wasn't about money. In his rise to the top, he met people who valued him for his character, not his net worth. Among them was a woman, kind, ambitious, and genuine, who reminded him that love wasn't about social status, but about partnership and respect. Years passed, and Ethan became unrecognizable from the heartbroken young man who had once begged Sophia to choose love over wealth. He was now the one people envied, the one they sought approval from. Then, one day, an invitation arrived, a high-profile gala back in Fairhaven, hosted by none other than the Harrington family. Ethan smirked as he read the invitation. It was time to return. Years had passed since Ethan Carter left Fairhaven, but as his car cruised down the familiar roads leading into town, it was clear that he was no longer the same man. The boy who had once been cast aside, humiliated, and told he would never be enough had become a self-made millionaire, powerful, respected, and untouchable. The occasion for his return was a high-profile gala hosted by none other than the Harrington family. They had extended the invitation personally, though Ethan knew it wasn't out of kindness. Word had traveled fast. Ethan Carter was now one of the wealthiest men in the state, a name whispered in business circles with admiration and fear. Suddenly, the town that once dismissed him now wanted his attention. As he stepped out of his luxury car onto the grand steps of the Harrington estate, heads turned. The once poor mechanic had returned, but now he wore a tailored suit, a commanding presence, and an air of quiet confidence that demanded respect. The whispers in the room were deafening. Is that really Ethan Carter? My God, look at him. He's richer than half the people here. Didn't Sophia used to be engaged to him? Speaking of Sophia, she was there, standing in the center of the glittering ballroom, just as stunning as he remembered, yet something was different. Her once bright eyes now carried a shadow of regret. Her smile was forced, and her laughter hollow. And beside her, the man her family had chosen for her, Jason Reynolds. His smug arrogance had only deepened with time, but Ethan could see the cracks. The rumors were true. Jason was unfaithful, careless, and more invested in his family's wealth than in his wife. Sophia's gaze met Ethan's across the room, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then came the inevitable. William Harrington, the man who had once sneered at Ethan's love for his daughter, approached him with an outstretched hand and a carefully practiced smile. "Ethan," he greeted, as if they were old friends. "I must say, I always knew you had potential." Ethan smirked, shaking his hand just long enough to be polite. "That's funny. I seem to recall you telling me I'd never be good enough." William chuckled, a forced, nervous sound. "Ah, youth. Sometimes we make mistakes." Ethan didn't reply. He didn't need to. The tables had turned and they all knew it. Sophia, unable to resist, finally approached. "Ethan," she said softly. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Sophia." 1,000 words hung between them, unsaid. Regret, longing, what-ifs, but Ethan was no longer the heartbroken man she had left behind. He had outgrown the pain, outgrown her. And tonight, he was here not to look back, but to show them all just how wrong they had been. The grand ballroom shimmered under golden chandeliers, the air thick with expensive perfume, murmured conversations, and the clinking of champagne glasses. This was Fairhaven's elite at their finest, gathered for an evening of celebration hosted by none other than the Harrington family. But tonight, the real spectacle wasn't the event. It was the man who had returned. Ethan Carter. The boy they had once dismissed was now the most powerful man in the room. He moved through the crowd with effortless confidence, shaking hands with business moguls, exchanging pleasantries with influential figures. Where once he had been ignored, now he commanded attention. And Sophia Harrington felt every second of it. She had watched him all evening, her heart tightening each time she caught sight of the man she had let go. The years had sculpted him into someone even more striking, his presence magnetic, his aura untouchable. Her husband, Jason Reynolds, had long since abandoned her to mingle with investors, laughing too loudly, his eyes wandering toward younger women. The realization hit her like a wave. She had made a mistake, a terrible, irreversible mistake. Summoning her courage, she approached Ethan. "Can we talk?" He turned to her, his expression unreadable. Of course. They stepped onto the balcony, away from the prying eyes of Fairhaven's elite. For a moment, there was only silence between them, the cool night air swirling around them. Then, Sophia exhaled shakily. I never stopped thinking about you, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Not a day has gone by that I haven't wondered. What if? Ethan studied her, his gaze calm. He didn't look at her with longing or bitterness, only quiet understanding. What if? He repeated. You made your choice, Sophia. I was scared, she confessed, her voice breaking. I thought money and security mattered more than love. But Jason, he doesn't love me. He never did. I see that now. Ethan nodded, but there was no flicker of regret in his eyes, only certainty. And you think I still do? She swallowed. Could we ever? Before she could finish, the doors to the ballroom opened, and a hush fell over the crowd. A man in a suit stepped forward and cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an announcement. Ethan turned to Sophia, his smirk subtle but devastating. I was actually waiting for this moment. The man continued. It is with great excitement that we announce Ethan Carter as the new majority stakeholder in Harrington Enterprises. A stunned silence, then gasps. William Harrington's face went pale. Sophia staggered back. Ethan? He gave her a slow, knowing nod. I came back, Sophia, but not for you. As murmurs filled the room, a woman appeared beside Ethan, slipping her hand into his. She was poised, elegant, and radiant with quiet confidence. Sophia, she greeted with a warm smile. Ethan squeezed his fiancée's hand gently before looking back at Sophia. You see, I learned something over the years. Wealth doesn't define happiness. Choices do. With that, he turned, leaving behind the past and stepping fully into the life he had built for himself. And for the first time in her life, Sophia Harrington knew what true regret felt like. The grand ballroom, once filled with whispers of admiration and awe, had fallen into stunned silence. The weight of Ethan Carter's announcement, his ownership of Harrington Enterprises, hung in the air like a thundercloud, crackling with unspoken truths. The man they had once discarded was now the one they all looked up to. Sophia stood frozen, her heart pounding as the reality of her choices crashed down on her. She had once been the love of Ethan's life, the woman he had begged to stand by his side. But when the moment had come, she had chosen wealth over love, security over passion. And now, standing there in her glittering gown, with a husband who barely acknowledged her, she saw the full extent of her mistake. Her father, William Harrington, was visibly shaken, his grip tightening around his whiskey glass. The man who had once dismissed Ethan as nothing more than a poor dreamer now had to answer to him. And Jason, her husband, had long since slithered away into the crowd, avoiding the fallout. Sophia's throat tightened as she watched Ethan standing tall, composed, victorious. He had won, not just in wealth, but in life. And the final blow wasn't his business takeover. It was the woman standing beside him. She was beautiful, poised, and most importantly, happy. The way Ethan looked at her, the way he effortlessly intertwined his fingers with hers, it was clear. He had moved on. Sophia swallowed hard. Ethan, she began, her voice soft, almost desperate. He turned toward her, his expression calm, unreadable. The boy who had once loved her with his entire heart was gone. In his place stood a man who no longer needed her validation, her love, or her presence. She faltered. I'm happy for you, she finally whispered, though the words tasted like regret. Ethan studied her for a long moment before nodding. I hope you are, Sophia. His voice was steady, not unkind, but final. And then, with his fiancée's hand in his, he turned and walked away.
Sophia watched him go, her vision blurring, as she stood in the midst of everything she had once thought mattered: wealth, status, privilege. But none of it felt real anymore. Not when she had lost the one thing money could never buy. As Ethan stepped outside into the night, he took a deep breath of the crisp, cool air. He didn't need to look back. He had made peace with his past, and his future lay ahead of him, filled with promise, love, and the success he had earned with his own two hands. Somewhere behind him, in the golden glow of the ballroom, Sophia Harrington stood alone in a room full of people, and for the first time in her life, she realized she had everything, yet nothing at all.